Hi, and welcome back to the module on qualitative research for OT510. I'm Susan Magacy, and I'm facilitating this section of the course. The expectation of this section is that you will review the lecture content as well as the readings in advance before class so that we can focus on applying and workshopping the course content together as a group. This is the final session in this 5-part series, and we'll focus on the basics of qualitative analysis. So what is qualitative data analysis? Let's start by looking at a definition. It is a systematic, iterative, and inductive process of meaning-making from the narrative data. It is very much a bottom-up approach to data analysis, and it requires that multiple checks and balances be implemented and documented to help control biases and enhance the trustworthiness of the findings. So let's break this definition down a little bit. Qualitative analysis is iterative and ongoing throughout the process of your research study. You'll recall that qualitative data collection and qualitative analysis should happen in tandem or at the same time. What this allows you to do is have one data collection session build upon the other by being aware of the emergent themes and figuring out how to explore or dig deeper into the issues identified. This tandem process of data collection and data analysis also allows you to track these themes that you're identifying from the data so that you can identify when you've reached that point of redundancy in data collection, or what we call theoretical saturation. Theoretical saturation is one method for determining the adequacy of the sample, and it's one of those core Q criteria for helping to determine the adequacy or the rigor of a qualitative study. Qualitative analysis typically proceeds from descriptive to conceptual to theory building, so increasingly nuanced and exploration of relationships. Now, not all qualitative researchers and research gets to the point of theory development, and that's okay, depending on the research question and the research methodology. So what you're trying to accomplish with your research study will determine how far through this process of descriptive, conceptual, and theory building you go. But it's important to be mindful of this progression. Qualitative analysis involves a constant process of coding and recoding the data, so tapping into that concept of reflexivity, of continually shifting the lens to look at the data from different vantage points, different perspectives. How do you compare findings across individuals or data collection sessions or data sources? It'll allow you to gain deeper understandings into the data. And finally, it's important that those analytic decisions be tracked and documented. This is essential for ensuring that there is transparency and that reviewers and readers of your research can judge from yourself the quality and adequacy of your work. But how do we actually do this qualitative analysis? We start with the code. A code is a basic tool of the analytic process and the foundation upon which your analysis will be built. A code is a word or a phrase that describes a key attribute of a chunk of narrative data. Now, a chunk can be a sentence, it can be a paragraph, and that's part of the analytic decisions that you as a researcher will make. You want the code to be, or that chunk of data, to be sufficiently rich to be able to stand alone and provide some context, but not so big that multiple codes or multiple themes are tangled in there. We use codes to help us categorize the data, make sense of the data. And coding is really that process of assigning codes to the data. A coding dictionary. So as you start identifying codes, you'll create a coding dictionary. And this is really just a compilation of the emergent codes along with a brief definition or description. What this does is it helps you ensure consistency in coding, both within yourself as an individual researcher and across multiple coders. If you're doing a qualitative research study, you're going to be analyzing those data for an extended period of time, and you want to make sure that you're consistent in how you're applying codes, whether it's first thing in the morning and you've just had a cup of coffee and are all perky, or if it's late at night and you're kind of drooping, you should still have your coding dictionary to be able to ensure that consistency. The coding dictionary should be considered a living document, and it will evolve as the analysis proceeds. You might end up finding that a code that you thought was really good at the beginning lacks precision, or it applied once and you'd never used it again. So then you make decisions. Do you keep it? Do you write a more tailored, targeted definition? Or sometimes you need to collapse codes because they're repetitive and redundant. And sometimes you need to split things out because they cover too much ground in a single code. Regardless, you're going to want to track, again, revisions that you make to your coding dictionary. When did they happen? Why did they happen? And this becomes part of your audit trail. Again, that document to help be more transparent and consistent. Now, there are multiple strategies for developing codes. Dr. Leslie Curry of Yale University identifies this simple 3 strategies. The first is a purely inductive approach, which is grounded in grounded theory methods. In this approach, codes are developed de novo from the data, so the researchers, analysts go in naive without any pre-identified codes. And the idea is that this helps limit the possibility of the researcher imposing their view or their preconceived ideas on the results. The start list method begin with a preliminary organizing framework, so some predefined codes that are drawn from literature review, from team expertise, and it provides more structure to the coding process. What you want to be careful of is that it doesn't limit the flexibility of the research team, so that if new or unexpected themes emerge that maybe are not reported in the literature or those experts were not aware of, you want to have the flexibility to be able to fold those into your coding strategy. So the integrated approach really retains the benefits of inductive coding while acknowledging that the prior research and expertise does exist. So you start with broad codes, but then you develop subcodes and new codes from the emergent data. So a little bit more flexibility than the sort list method. So descriptive coding is the first step, again, in the analytic process. And there are many, many approaches to qualitative data analysis, derived largely from whatever methodological tradition you are using. What we're going to discuss in class is the generic process, or a generic process of analysis that integrates key principles that can be applicable regardless of a specific methodology. So when you embark on your descriptive coding process, you want to start by just reading the transcript. Don't worry about coding it, just read it, and then reflect. So again, reflexivity, read, reflect, and based on that reflection, you're going to start developing a preliminary coding dictionary. What are the themes that you've started to identify? How would you describe those or codify them with a definition? Once you have that preliminary coding dictionary, you start applying it to a subset of your transcripts. You can add in new codes as they emerge from subsequent transcripts or data collection. And then after you've coded this first subset, what you want to do is get together with other coders, other people who are looking and reading and analyzing the data. So this allows you to triangulate your coding strategy. Often at this point, you'll identify differences in how people are applying the codes, differences in how big or how small a chunk of data people are coding. And based on this negotiation, you'll typically revise the coding process and gain consistency. So this recursive process of independent coding, meeting as a team to discuss and negotiate, again, helps ensure consistency, but it can also help check some of those biases and make sure that you're constantly shifting that lens in the analysis. So then once you've created your final coding dictionary, then you can go ahead and apply it to all of the transcripts. At this point, you should have reached consistency among coders, so it's not as important to meet quite as often, but you still want to maintain those sort of checks and triangulation points. Now, at the end of the descriptive coding process, you typically have a large set of descriptive codes. And the conceptual coding process, or the next phase in the process, involves organizing those data into conceptual or meaningful categories. And again, this is really the process of making meaning and recognizing patterns and interconnections between your descriptive codes. I like to compare conceptual coding to sorting the laundry. At the end of your phase of descriptive coding, you usually have a laundry list of codes. But how do you make sense of them? It is at this stage that you go through the process of developing and defining conceptual linkages, similarities, differences between categories. So just like when you look at this pile of laundry, you could sort it by color, by owner, by type of clothing. It depends on what makes sense for your research question. The development of those conceptual categories can shift as you develop deeper understandings or engage in constant comparisons between cases and data sources. So again, this is the strategy of triangulating data from multiple participants, sources, and interpretations. The conceptual categories that you identify can also change based on the context. So for example, the categories that make sense when sorting this laundry might be different if I'm dealing with dirty laundry that I'm about to wash. So then I might want to sort by color or fabric type, compared to when I'm putting away clean clothes. Then I want to sort them by owner or by type of clothing. It's important also to track those discrepant cases, those cases that just don't fit with your coding structure. In quantitative research, there is a tendency to drop the outliers. In qualitative research, we believe that the outliers provide important insights into a phenomena under study. Now, there are no hard and fast rules about how many conceptual categories to have, but in your typical research article, you tend to see something in the 3 to 6 range. More than this, and you may be overly broad in your research question, or at least in the analysis that you're trying to present in any single study or paper. Now, many researcher studies stop here at the level of conceptual coding. And again, depending on your research methodology and question, this might be an appropriate place to stop. But some methodologies, like grounded theory, seek to actually generate theories and develop hypotheses from the analysis. For our work in this class, we're going to stop at the level of conceptual coding, but it's important for you to recognize the role that qualitative research plays in theory development. This figure is just designed to show the progression and the increasing nuance and complexity in understanding that comes as you proceed from descriptive coding of individual transcripts to conceptual coding of your code list and and linked quotations, to then the theory development that comes from looking at the interconnections and relationships between conceptual categories. In this course, we'll be hand coding the qualitative data, but it's important to recognize that there are a number of qualitative analysis softwares on the market that can help the qualitative researcher with data management and analysis. So typical qualitative research studies generate vast quantities of narrative data, and software helps organize those data. Use of qualitative software is also increasingly an expectation in reporting, and it's included as one of the line items in the core Q criteria that were described in the module on strategies to enhance rigor. This is a screenshot of Atlas TI software, one of the qualitative analysis software. So typically what we do is we record a data collection session. That recording is then transcribed verbatim into a written transcript. That written transcript is then imported into the software for analysis. The user is then able to create a code list and code dictionary right within the software, and you see this over on the left-hand side of the screen. And then what you do is you highlight chunks of the text that you decide are meaningful and select and assign appropriate codes to that. There are also opportunities within the software to enter comments and memos, so you can do or construct your audit trail right within the qualitative software as well. And what's nice is it auto stamps, timestamps when entries are made. The software also enables the user to sort the data in a variety of ways that can facilitate analysis as well as help you visualize the data. So again, while we're not using software to do the analysis in this course, it's good for you to be aware of it. And if you do go on to do more qualitative research, there are many courses and learning tools available. So one important caveat about qualitative analysis software, it is not a shortcut on the tough, labor-intensive intellectual work of qualitative analysis. It helps organize and structure, but you still have to do the work yourself. So throughout the qualitative analysis process, we need to implement strategies to enhance rigor. So first, qualitative analysis is best done as a team to guard against rigor. And we've talked throughout this module about different ways of comparing and contrasting, triangulating the coding. Peer examination and member checking can also help control biases. So getting outsider feedback, maybe haven't looked at all of the data, but are familiar with the issue and can provide feedback and again, another way of understanding or thinking about the data. Again, all examples of triangulation. We've talked about reflexivity and how it's required throughout the coding process. Constantly thinking, reinterpreting, looking for deeper connections. And again, that audit trail is just essential in your analytic process to track decisions, enhance transparency and dependability of the findings. So in conclusion, qualitative analysis can be a long, painstaking process. It is an inherently human process. There are no shortcuts. It is iterative in nature and involves the process of coding and recoding. It can proceed from descriptive to conceptual to theoretical, and it yields rich insights into a phenomena of interest. I hope this module has helped give you an appreciation of qualitative analysis process and the tools to help you get started.